Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtually Sunday. I am Steve Meyer.
And I'm Tony Pickler. And this week, Steve, we are reflecting on the readings for the first Sunday of Lent. Both the readings, the first reading comes from the book of Genesis, first book of the Bible. And it's a really familiar story of Adam and Eve, and Eve being offered this, the apple, so to speak, and offering that then to Adam. And then the gospel is going to be the temptations in the desert by Jesus. And so both these readings I feel are just so familiar. And sometimes I feel like we just shut our brains off. Like we've heard them so many times. What would there be new to reflect upon and apply to our lives? And so I think that's our challenge today.
Yeah, well, I have a new take
All right.
on
Well,
that first Genesis reading. So I wrote about it in my new book, The Hole in Our Soul.
you got a new book out?
Yeah,
All right. Just a little advertisement.
So well,
right.
It's just a little reference to this.
Okay.
A couple quick paragraphs here, right? There's a saying in Eastern philosophy that if you want to know something, you must go to its opposite. If you want to truly appreciate light, you must experience darkness. If you want to value joy, you must experience despair. If you want to know love, you must experience loneliness and isolation. Thus, it follows that if you want to fully understand the value of unity and wholeness, we must experience the consequences of individualism. So Adam and Eve sneak a bite of the old apple. Now, why? Why would they do that? They're tempted by the self-aggrandizement of individualism. Why should they share in God's knowledge and wisdom when they can have their own? Why should they settle for being one with the one when they can become number one within themselves? Why be content to be stardust in the universe when they can be the star of their own universe, however small that might be? In Christian parlance, Tony, we call this original sin, but it's a concept that seems so archaic it rarely gets even mentioned anymore. If you want to be the person everyone talks about for days after the party, go ahead and bring up original sin. You'll never get invited back, but most certainly you'll be remembered. Yet, this is the proverbial core of the apple. It's the human tendency to want to go it alone. And it's what we do, isn't it? We want to believe the myth of the self-made achiever, to want to be master rather than servant, and to put ego interests ahead of the common good. Jesus had a lot to say about this, and it wasn't favorable. Nonetheless, there's a part of each one of us that likes this idea, this original sin. We like putting ourselves first before all others. In fact, we sort of like making little gods of ourselves. We can scapegoat Adam and Eve all we want, but most of us sink our own teeth into that apple every day.
And there, I think, my friend, is where we can get the meaning for our own lives, right? That that part about individualism, right? That fits our culture so well. The United States, we are so much about individualism instead of community, instead of each other, instead of looking out for the other.
So now we take that, right? Because we're anchored in this idea of the great individualism and the self-made person. We're so proud of who we make ourselves into that we forget that we're not the ones who made ourselves in the first place. But now let's contrast that with the gospel reading. And Jesus, he's 40 days in the desert, going without food. He's fasting, and he comes out, and he's faced with the same temptations.
Right. And so Jesus has these three temptations, and they're so familiar to us, brought up to the parapet of the temple. He's offered, to turn the stones that are in front of him into bread. He's offered the kingdoms that he can see. He's offered this chance to throw himself off the parapet, and that angels will come and miraculously save him, right? So these temptations are so familiar to us.
Yeah, there are really three archetypes of temptations, right? The first one is self-comfort, right? And make myself as comfortable as
Stones in the
possible,
bread,
right?
yeah.
And then the second one is self-aggrandizement. It's that sense of, look how great I am. In today's world, we would call it fame. So we want comfort, money, and we want fame. And then the third temptation
Mhm.
is power,
Right.
really.
Right.
So these are the three horsemen, if you will,
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
individualism, right? Wealth, power, and fame.
Right. And that's why, we always have that first reading and the gospel play off of each other, right? There should be some connection to it. So I feel like you're loading that up pretty well here, Steve, to make that connection. What's the connection from Adam and Eve and that story of individualism to what Jesus is facing now?
Yeah, so if we talk about this theologically for a moment, we have the theology of the fall, Adam and Eve falling out of oneness with
Mhm.
God. In Eden, they live in unitive oneness, right,
Mhm.
with God, and everything's heavenly
Mhm.
because it is,
Right.
right? And then they fall out of that because they are lured away by self-elevation and individualism.
Right.
All right, then for the entire Old Testament,
Mhm.
up until the time of Jesus, we have the story of humanity and God trying to
Mhm.
reconcile
Right.
and come back together.
Right.
All right, then Jesus shows up. All
Mhm.
right, and we have this story of him right at the very front end of his ministry.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
before he even starts being public about it,
Right.
he faces the same temptations. But what does he do? He does the opposite.
Yeah.
Instead of caving into "Look how great I am," he's like, "Get away from me,
Mhm.
Satan."
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so we have the serpent in the Genesis story saying, "Eat the apple,"
Right.
and we have the serpent in the desert story telling Jesus, "Eat the apple." And the difference is he says, no, there's no joy there. There's no happiness
Right.
there. There's no love there.
So really the answer that Jesus has is a different answer, right? It's a different way of looking at those temptations and dealing with it. It's a different answer.
It's a different answer with a very different result.
Right.
And he's essentially what he's doing is he's reversing the fall
Mhm.
with what we will come to know as the rise. So at Easter time, he's going to be raised from the dead, and so we reverse the fall in Genesis with the rise of Jesus.
So let's just touch for a second then on this is the first week of Lent. We lead off with these two stories, and now we have 40 days to ponder it, right? I mean, to what? What's our answer?
So yeah, I was thinking about that a little bit because we think that Jesus was tempted in the desert, but if you really read the way Matthew structures it, he's tempted when he leaves the desert,
Mm, mm,
right? It's
mhm,
after the 40 days
mhm,
that he faces the temptation.
mhm,
So we need to realize that these 40 days of our Lenten desert
mhm,
are are strengthening for us.
mhm.
They help us create the strength and the courage and the fortitude so that when we come out and we come back into the world, we, like Jesus, have the wisdom, the strength, the fortitude to stand up to those temptations.
So now we go into these 40 days of Lent, right? Into the desert, into this time of reflection, this time of pondering how are we relating to God? How are we
Yeah.
relating to each other? How are we not being individuals and better living in community?
And a 40 days of being tested. So if you look at the
Mm,
way the Hebrews stories were told, 40 always meant a time of being tested,
right.
right? For 40 years in the desert, 40
Mhm,
days in the desert, right?
mhm.
I mean, and that's a period of being tested. So let's look at over the next 40 days, we're all going to be faced with all sorts of temptations,
Mhm.
if you will, but, notions, voices telling us to look out for number one,
Right.
right? We're gonna test our resolve
Mhm,
on whether or not we really are committed to this mission of Christ
mhm.
of returning into unitive oneness with Creator and all creation.
So we begin the journey. We begin this journey of Lent. And so, Steve, as you always do, why don't you send us off with a blessing?
Oh, may the contemplative joy of the Lenten desert rain down upon you. May the contemplative joy of the Lenten desert stir the heart within you, and may the contemplative joy of the Lenten desert flow into the world through you. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone.